Hey, my name's Mike and I'm the owner and operator of Rock-Pebble-Shears, landscape design and maintenance. In this video, I will cover the first steps we took to turn this plain old entryway into a welcoming gathering place that this customer dubbed Piazza, which means gathering place in Italian. More specifically, we will be covering the excavation, preparation of the subgrade, base prep, as well as the retaining wall and pillar construction. In part 2 of this series, we will go deeper into preparing the base and bedding aggregates to lay our pavers on. Let's jump right in. So on this job, I was hired by some family friends, Jim and Marianne. They were able to source their own materials for this project from her place of work, so it ended up working out for everybody. The only drawback was that some of the materials were old and in limited supply, or just not what we were expecting. So we ended up with a hodgepodge of a few different things and got creative with what we had. So with that said, one thing led to another with the project plan. It was just supposed to be a basic paver, patio, walkway, entryway to get to that side door because it was a little treacherous for their parents to walk over. So here I am setting up my rotary laser to check the grade or elevation of the area. I'm just making sure the patio ends up being 6 inches below that step to go inside. I'm also using it to determine how low we need to excavate for our retaining wall and seating wall to end up at the proper height on the other side. In the very beginning of the video, you can see the homeowner Jim and I pulling out cinder blocks, or CMU, concrete masonry units out of the ground. Those were installed earlier as some kind of retainer to level that area off for the previous patio. And so here I am just measuring everything out, and I'm marking the area for the patio design. I'm just using some basic orange marking paint or spray paint. Jim's helping us excavate just about a foot or so wider than what we marked out, just so our base material can go a little bit further than our pavers do. This just adds extra stability to the edge of the pavers. And here I'm talking to Jim about how we want the water to shed away from the house, so everything needs to be pitched away from the foundation. And in a second, he's gonna come in with his tractor. That's why we were trimming some tree branches in the beginning of the video. What I failed to record was the next day when I came back with a mini bucket loader, a little ride-on Bobcat MT100, and I finished up the rest of the excavation with that because this tractor had some hydraulic fluid problems. So we got a good chunk of it with this done. But then I came in the next day with a mini bucket loader, a skid loader, whatever you'd like to call it. And as you can see, there's some 3/4 crushed stone right up against the concrete foundation there. And I'm just gonna dig that out by hand and make a little pile because we're actually gonna try to reuse that. We're gonna press it into the subsoil. So after we're done all our excavation and everything, I'm just gonna put a thin layer of that 3/4 crushed stone down and then run a compactor over it. This is called a gradation amendment or fixing the base. It just allows water to percolate into the subsoil a lot easier, rather than having like a clay kind of soil that really is impervious to water. And for those of you that don't know, the sub-base or subgrade is really just the native earth that's there, the undisturbed soil that's going to be underneath our base materials that we're installing for our pavers. Alright, so now that we've got most of our excavation done in this area, we just dug out the wall trench, bury our couple courses of block, and we have our drain trench, which is gonna be tied into these channel drains, these trench drains that go into a perforated pipe, and that's gonna allow water to disperse into the subsoil back there. So in goes some rock, and we're gonna build our wall. So as you guys can see right there in the wall trench, there's a tarp-like material. That's a woven geotextile landscape fabric. It's also known as a stabilization fabric. Basically, it's going to stabilize the soil from mixing with our base material. What isn't shown is when I spread out that reused 3/4 crushed stone and compacted it into the subgrade. Like I said, that's just to help water to percolate down into the subbase. Then we put down the woven geotextile fabric and we start building up off of that. Typically under a retaining wall like we're building here, I would put in class 5 base, which is 3/4 crushed stone all the way down to fine aggregates. creates kind of like a binding material, which becomes hard like concrete when it's packed down. We had just clean 3/4 crushed stone with no fines in it on hand, so that's what we went with for our base material for the retaining wall. Yep. Yeah, you can fill it right in around that pipe. Perfect. So Ricky and I are putting in the crushed stone around the perforated pipe, which we wrapped in the landscape fabric. Landscape fabric's gonna keep all this silt from getting into this little perforations in this pipe. That way it will always stay clean in there, but the water can escape through this nice landscape fabric. So we're gonna fill in with crushed stone around it to allow kind of a dry well type situation, and we'll see in a minute. Alright, all the base rock is in for the retaining wall block. In hindsight, wish we went an inch deeper to screed a layer of chipstone over the top for the bedding of these, but we have our string line set up 90 degrees to the house, so everything's square. You can see. And so what I was saying there for the bedding layer, I would use a really small stone, an angular 1/4 inch or 3/8 chipstone. Just helps to shift around a little better than the 3/4 inch crushed stone does. When we're trying to set these blocks, they're really tough to get them to settle down and get them level, whereas if we put in that base layer, the screed layer of chipstone, it would have been a lot easier. Unfortunately, these blocks themselves had a unforgivable tolerance where they were all different sizes of thicknesses. So even though we had our base row perfectly level, perfectly flat, by the time we got to our second row, each block, one block to the next, was a different height. So it ended up throwing things off. I just ended up using some pennies to shim them up. This is kind of known ever since 2020. There's been really big issues with supply chain and quality control as far as these products go. So we just worked with what we had, and it still came out great. So what wasn't pictured here is we put a 90-degree elbow attached to some solid PVC, and that PVC is attached through a hole in the woven geotextile fabric that goes to that perforated pipe. This PVC pipe is just going to be attached to those channel drains, like I said earlier, and that will allow any water that's running away from the house and off of the roof to go down the patio, down the drain, and out underneath the wall without disturbing any of the base material under the wall. You can see me here just using a brush to clean all the aggregate off of the top of the blocks. There's actually these little plastic pins that go into the T-shaped holes that are in the retaining wall block, and that just allows you to have proper alignment, and it allows them to lock together so that anything that pushes against the retaining wall won't push it over or make the block slide. So here we are getting our second course in. These blocks are facing outwards because they're actually going to be retaining all the base for our patio. But the next row is going to be flipped around facing us because that's what's going to be exposed above our patio. So the backside isn't pretty, but we have all the vegetation there to cover it up, and it wasn't a concern for these customers. In any other circumstance where we supply the materials, we would bring in corner blocks instead of just using these full-size retaining wall blocks. That just gives a cleaner aesthetic on the outer corners. I don't know if you can see from this angle, but there just isn't an actual corner to this. They're all full-size retaining wall blocks, and we ended up gluing them together. And here you see us core filling them. This just gives extra rigidity to the wall, kind of locks them together unit to unit, and gives it some more weight so it has more stability, more purchase against any kind of forces against the wall. And as far as that unfinished section of the wall goes, we just had to hold off until we got confirmation from the homeowner on our change in the original plan. Originally, the pillar was supposed to bump out quite a bit more, but to me it felt like it was going to obstruct the natural flow of the entryway. So we opted to setting it back and making the backside flush with the back of the retaining wall. So this is actually the next day, and it looks like I've already got my base put in on the left side there and a couple of corner blocks laid out where the pillar is going to be. It looks like the PVC pipe has already been cut to the proper height for the trench drain to be installed, and now I'm here just adding the next row of block for the wall. You can tell I'm taking a little time to get the blocks leveled out because I have to shim some of them up with some pennies. Like I mentioned earlier, the tolerances on these blocks were out of spec, so I could either grind each block down with a grinding wheel or shim them up to save on some of the labor cost. Luckily, Marianne had a bunch of pennies to donate to the cause. So once the next row of block is installed, we can move on to building the columns. Okay, so here we go putting in some more base material. We're making it more level in that area since we confirmed where the pillars are going to be. So Ricky's over there hand tamping the area while I cut some wall block in half for the cheek ends of the retaining wall. And if you're wondering what that trench drain is, that's a Tough Tight brand trench drain. I got that from our local supplier, Hudson Quarry. Thank you guys so much for that. It works great and it's rated for a vehicular application, so it's more than adequate for this scenario. So these blocks that we're going to be building our pillars with are actually the original retaining wall blocks that the customer purchased. Unfortunately, they were all corner units that couldn't be used as a proper retaining wall. So instead of returning them or tossing them aside, I made the suggestion that we utilize them and build pillars with a seating wall since we needed to get more wall block anyways. Luckily, that one oversight is what led to such a beautiful and functional space overall. So getting this base course level is super important because that's what's going to set us up for success with building the rest of this pillar. We have to make sure each block is level from side to side, front to back, and also level with each adjacent block. We're using the Sika brand landscape adhesive, that's S-I-K-A. It actually seemed to hold up really well. When we put our blocks down on the adhesive, we use a technique called catch, release, catch. This means that when we put our blocks down on the adhesive, there's a surface tension to the glue that creates a skin layer. When we lift the block back up, it breaks that skin layer and creates a much better bond when you put the block back down. After the block is put back down, it rapidly begins to become extremely difficult to pull the blocks apart. This technique gives us a much better adhesion. Here I'm just getting the base preparation done for the second column. This is a 3/8 inch chipstone and I'm just making sure that it's all level. The chipstone makes it a lot easier to adjust each block and make sure that everything is level on top of the bedding stone, as opposed to trying to level them off on our 3/4 inch crushed base material. Just giving it a little hand tamp to make sure everything is consolidated and flattened out. That way there's less room for settling in the future. Gonna be finishing up these pillars, and this floor drain, this little trench drain, goes down and under the wall, and then down this trench through a perforated pipe. Probably showed you earlier in this video. And Ricky's over here installing the pop-up drain, pop-up emitter. That way, if this thing ever backs up, what's up, Ricky? If this thing ever backs up, and you can't flow out through the holes fast enough, it'll come out through this. Just like that. Pops right up. It's gonna be flush with the lawn. We'll be able to mow right over it. All will be well. So if you guys have enjoyed the video thus far, please go over and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more hardscaping and landscaping content. just about to fill in this gap in between the trench drain and the retaining wall. So we're gonna actually use some chip stone on this, some 3/8 chip, just to get in there easily. Fill that up for the most part. And then we're gonna put this backer rod in there, this foam backer rod. And we'll just kind of block that off, and I'll seal it up with self-leveling sealant. Sika, it's gonna be gray in color. Self-leveling, so it's gonna go all the way around here, down to that end, and that end's actually snug up against the wall. So I might get a little bit of sealant in there, but it'll be good either way. Patio is gonna come right up to the very top of this, so everything should drain right in there. Nothing should get in between the wall and the drain, and we're on to the next step. So actually, for behind this trench drain, we're gonna go at 3/4 for the most part. Top it off with the 3/8 stone just to get a top layer, and then I'll put the backer rod in. So let's go for it. After we built this second pillar, I went home happy. But around 2 a.m. in the middle of the night, I had the idea that it would be so nice to have a third pillar and a return wall connecting to the side of the porch. I wasn't so sure they would want to go for it. This project was just supposed to be simple. But sure enough, that very morning I got a text from Mary Ann, and I was really happy to hear that she had the same idea. One thing led to another with this project, so at first we needed to add a small retainer wall just to make sure that the patio wasn't too much of a slope, but that led us to getting the corner blocks, which led us to the idea of making pillars with a seating wall. So the seating wall then required a drain for the water to pass under the wall, and that led to a third column or pillar. And after that, we decided that we're going to add a gate in between the two as well. So we had to make sure that the gate matched the distance between the two columns. So we waited to have the proper gate, and because the gate was too tall, we ended up adding another row on top of this pillar. What you see here is the pillars before we added the next course of block. We didn't quite realize that they needed to be so high just yet, but we figured that out soon after we got the gate. I think that's what Marianne and I are discussing right now, is the height of the pillars. So these are the coping caps that go on top of the pillars and seating wall. They have 3 smooth sides and a textured split face on one side. So here I am hand chiseling the surface off to match that textured side on all 4 edges of the pillar cap. We do have a hydraulic block splitter, but it isn't capable of taking off such a small amount. I think these matched pretty well, but I definitely got much better at the process after the 3rd pillar. You'll see me using the yellow handled masonry chisel from Home Depot first to take the edges off, and then I learned to use my carbide tipped hand point chisel from Trow & Holden. After that, I finished the surface off with a carbide bushing hammer to take out any flat spots and cover up the marks from the hand point chisel. Oh, starting to rain on me. If you stop the video real fast right there, you can see me holding a frog if we found a toad. In this shot, Ricky's bringing in some more base material. For our original excavation, we dig down about a foot. That gives us about enough room for a 3/4 inch gradation amendment compacted into the sub-base. After that, we add our woven geotextile fabric. Most of our patios and walkways used for light pedestrian traffic have anywhere from 4 to 6 inches of 3/4 inch crushed clean stone for the base. On top of that, we lay 1 inch of 3/8 inch clean crushed bluestone for bedding. This is considered an open graded base. Once the bedding is laid, we can finally lay our pavers. All of those height parameters have to be met and also have the patio end up at the exact height that we determine at the beginning of the project. There is a 2-inch pitch from the porch entrance to the drain grate over the course of about 14 feet. Typically 1 inch per every 8 feet is a sufficient pitch to shed the water away from the foundation, but we went with slightly more pitch to shed the water faster since this is the main entryway. Right here, I'm just checking the distance between the two pillars because we have to make sure that they're the perfect distance to make sure that the gate fits in between with the right amount of gap for the swing and the right amount of gap for the hinges. This is where I'm getting ready to start installing the third pillar. As you can see, the second pillar that we installed is 1 course higher now. When we went to get the rest of the corner block to do the third pillar, they actually ran a little shy. Our supplier did not have that, so they ended up giving us a couple of other colors of the same size corner block, and we tried to hide them on the backside, but we didn't know that they were a different color until most of the blocks were already glued down. Here we're just trying to make sure that the two pillars that are going to be on either side of the gate are lined up with one another, making sure that they're both square to the house. And what wasn't shown here actually was a little bit more excavation that was done. I dug down about 9 or 10 inches under that third pillar and put in a lot more base material. That just, most of the time, it's done with a concrete foundation. So this is just gonna give us some added stability to prevent settling. And there's that mismatched tan block that I was talking about earlier. I just tried to tuck them into the back side over here so that not too many people will see. The other corner blocks do have some tan mixed into them, so it's really not too bad in person. So here's a pretty good example. I start using the sharp Home Depot chisel here. I believe that's just a steel chisel. And then I switch over to my hand point carbide tipped chisel from John Holden. And I just finish it up with a little bit of texture with the bushing hammer, just to rough everything up and make sure that there's no like big chunks taken out from either of the other chisels. Alright, so here we are the following day. Looks like Ricky's just taking some grade measurements to get the right height for our screed rails. That way we can get the rest of our 3/4 inch stone put down to the right height. And I'm over there just getting some blocks prepared so that I can finish the return retaining wall that leads to the house from the 3rd pillar. Once Ricky gets all that 3/4 inch stone put down on top of some rails, we're gonna either use a level or a piece of wood to drag across the stone to get a nice level flat surface based on those grades that we set with the pipes. After that 3/4 inch stone is down, we can then put our 3/8 inch or 1/4 inch chipped stone down for our bedding layer, and we can finally start laying our pavers. So as you can see, Ricky is over here now just getting some stone put down and dragging it across the 2 rails with a level going across the 2 rails, and that's gonna set us up for our next step. Alrighty, this is the end of part 1, and I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you did, please like and subscribe to our channel. And I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, what you guys think of this video. So please leave a comment down below, and we'll see you on the next one.